Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the first session of the webinar series, Long-Term Energy Scenarios, LTES, for developing national energy transition plans in Africa. I am Asami Miketa. I'm leading the energy planning support team at International Renewable Energy Agency, IRENA, and I have the pleasure to be your host today. The LTES webinar series is organized as an activity under the framework of IRENA's LTES network, a network of energy scenario practitioners in the government sector. Over the next 3 weeks, we will feature selected African countries that can share their good scenario planning practices for setting long-term policy, particularly in the context of clean energy transition. And this webinar series is organized in partnership with United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, African Union Commission, African Development Agency, African Development Bank, Get Transform, and the government of Kenya. Partner organizations will take turn to moderate sessions in the coming days, and they will also give a short presentation on their activities in support of effective use and development of LTES in Africa. Next slide, please. Today's agenda is the following. So today, IRENA will moderate the whole session. And since this is the first session of the webinar series, we will take some more time to give the background of the LTES network and objective of the webinar series. And in today's session, we feature Kenya and Egypt, and we will learn their government planning practices using LTES. We allocate 15 minutes to each presentation, followed by half an hour discussion and Q&A. We then have a small session with a presentation from my colleague on IRENA's work to support institutional capacity building on energy planning in Africa. We will then conclude. Next slide, please. During the question and answer session, we will try to address some of the questions from the audience. So please use the Q&A function in the Zoom to ask questions to the speakers. And also the slides and recording will be made available on the IRENA web page. Next slide, please. So first, I would like to say a few words about LTES network. It is a network of energy scenario practitioners in the government sector, and it is a global platform for the government planners to exchange knowledge and good practices in the use and development of model-based energy scenarios, LTES, to guide clean energy transition. We also engage other scenario experts in technical institutions to keep our government planning community updated with the recent trends in scenario practices. And the network emerged from the LTES campaign that started in 2018 under the Clean Energy Ministerial, where IRENA served as the operating agent. We have currently 25 member countries and 11 technical institutions. And LTES member countries are those who already have a good planning practices, good scenario-based planning practices established, so that the discussion can focus on not just scenario-based planning, but more on peer-to-peer learning on the use of scenarios in the context of clean energy transition. And Kenya is the first country from Africa who joined the LTES network. Next slide, please. So why we talk about long-term energy scenarios now? So long-term energy scenarios are a fundamental tool for energy policy making. Many countries develop their country scenarios and use them as a basis for national policy making. And intergovernmental and international organizations, including IRENA, produce global scenarios to inform global policy debates. There are also a number of technical institutions that produce various policy scenarios as a part of scientific exercises. And this approach itself is not new. It has been around for a long time. But what is new is that we have now clear agreed mandate for global decarbonization, and also with massive technology innovation in and around energy sector. The future evolution of energy system is uncertain than ever. And it is in this context that the role of long-term energy scenarios is becoming even more important as a tool to support making right decisions to guide energy transition and planning. And this is the focus of IRENA's LTS network. The focus of our work is energy planning scenarios developed and used by the government as a part of national energy planning processes. And we provide platform for the government planning officials to exchange their experiences. Next slide, please. And I would also like to say a few words about the mental model used in the LTS network. So we focus on LTES used in the long-term planning processes of the government sector. And I would like to highlight that energy modeling tools are often used as inputs to formulate LTES, and also as an output of LTES, government develops policy documents such as master plan, and then use them to guide policy. And along these processes, stakeholder consultation takes place. And we focus on LTS, but not necessarily on the energy modeling tools or the policy outcomes. We have observed that often those who are responsible for LTS are not necessarily those who are responsible for energy modeling. And similarly, those responsible for LTS may be different from those responsible for the policy making. Next slide, please. So with this mental model in mind, the focus of the LTES network is threefold. The first pillar is about how the governments are developing scenarios, particularly in the context of developing scenarios to better reflect potential transformative changes of the energy sector. The second pillar is about how the governments are using scenarios to guide the clean energy transition. And the third pillar is about different approaches on building scenarios planning capacity within the government sector. Next slide, please. We had organized more than 50 events on various aspects of scenario planning last 3 years. And last year, we published a report synthesizing the best practices shared through all these events. And findings are organized around these three pillars of LTS network. Just very quickly, on the scenario development side, we have found that some governments established a strong governance structure for the scenario development process. And on the more methodology side, we found more and more governments are expanding the boundary of the scenarios being developed, and most notably to make the stronger link with the climate agenda. On the scenario use side, we noted that scenarios are used for different purposes, and it is critical to communicate clearly the purpose of scenarios developed and used. We also found that many countries are making efforts to make scenario process transparent, and few countries are adopting quite innovative approaches for effective communication of scenario results. Finally, on the capacity building approaches, we find different degree of insourcing and outsourcing the scenario building and interpretation capacity, reflecting specific circumstances of the countries. And types of capacity that governments have also differ, reflecting these circumstances. In this particular context of this Africa LTS webinar, we have asked the presenters to prepare their presentation in difference to these three pillars. And you can see that the focus of this webinar is not really so much on the results of individual government scenarios, but more about methodological and institutional framework for better development and use of scenarios for clean energy transition. Next slide, please. So with that, I would now like to introduce our first speaker from Kenya, Dr. Grace Unjel, Senior Economist at the Kenya Electricity Transmission Company, KETRACO. She leads project planning and regulatory affairs at KETRACO, and she has over 12 years of experience in preparing electricity sector master plans. And as mentioned earlier, the Kenya is the first African country who joined the LTS network. And the Ministry of Energy is one of the partners of Africa LTS webinar series. We will have a chance to ask questions to Grace, so please feel free to use the Q&A function so that I can address them during the Q&A session. So the Grace floor is yours. You can start the camera and you can start the presentation. Thank you.
Good morning, all participants, and thank you for offering me the opportunity to title my presentation energy planning process in Kenya, but down the line you realize we focus on. We can move to the next slide, please. Next slide, please. So the outline of my presentation is I have a background. I'll highlight the governing structure of what you plan to do to enhance that capacity. You can move to the next slide, please. So in terms of how the energy is constituted in the country right now, we fall under two ministries. We have the Ministry of Energy, which deals with everything else energy other than petroleum. Petroleum was done to petroleum mining. Because we also have focus on upstream work regarding as a result of legislations that are 2019. Now, the Energy Act, the ministry in which now we all fall under, is required to be preparing integrated national planning, which will be with respect to coal, GNT, and is envisaged in the Act. It's not active as we are getting ready with regulations, is that we will have all county governments doing their own energy plans, and then all utilities or the Act talks about the energy service providers, but all entities will be providing plans, which then will be put together into what is considered will be considered the integrated national energy plan. Now, the idea is to have 5 sub-energy plans. That is electricity, and this we still consider will still continue being done under the list of power development plan. We have energy excess, and then bioenergy, energy efficiency, energy resource management. We can move to the next slide, please. So electricity, as I said earlier, I'll focus more on electricity because it's where we have, we have everything going on and we all have it put together. We have constituted in a way that we have several committees. So we have a technical and oversight committee. The committee does the work, and it has all the sector entities, everybody, Kenya Power, KETRACO, EPRA, Ministry, everybody is included in the technical planning committee. And then we have an oversight committee, which has the same constitution in terms of the entity, has lesser members, but has more senior people who guide the technical team with regards to, energy planning, what policies should be done. But besides the energy sector entities, we also have Kenya Private Sector Alliance, the Vision 2030 Delivery Secretariat, and the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. The reason why we have KEPSA is Kenya is open. We have private parties participating in generation, and hopefully in the near future we'll also have them participating in transmission. The result, they need to be involved and to participate in the planning process. Simulation scientists are critical because our electricity plan is very predominantly very renewable. So we have a lot of geologists participating, hydrologists participating in the planning process and providing insights into the resource that we have. Then the financial analysts are involved in, at the end, we also develop a financial model that also gives an evolution of how we expect the tariffs to evolve out of the planning or out of the plans that we put in place. The team does the simulations itself and drafts the reports. In some cases, we engage consultants. Like the last time we had a consultancy firm work with us was in 2016. But what will happen is that finally we'll have the consultants, but we work with them. In the end, the work is developed together to make sure that the skill set is still retained within the country. We can move to the next slide, please. So once the plan is done, we have a governance structure that provides for certain approval, an approval process. So previously, we had the exercise being coordinated by the regulator, and that's EPRA. And the regulator would convene all the committees, that is with the technical and the oversight committees. And the oversight committee will review the technical reports and will approve it. It's shared by senior government level. So the approval is almost a guarantee that if it's accepted, then that report is good enough to be implemented. Then after that, the report will be presented to the EPRA board of directors. That is the regulator. That is the regulators approve, and then it's circulated to all entities for implementation. However, there's a suggestion to improve on the process. And what has happened is that the government has realized the need to have one of the utilities convene the technical committees. So currently, Kenya Power is convening the technical committee and the oversight committee. In terms of approval process, the oversight will still review and approve the draft. However, we have introduced a board level of approval there where all the entities will have to present the list cost now to the board, and the board approves and issues a resolution that they're in concurrence. Then after that, it's submitted to the ministry and eventually to the cabinet subcommittee on Kenya Power issues. Can move to the next slide, please. So in terms of implementation of the list cost and policy is that all projects in the sector have to be aligned to the list cost. It guides all the procurement, in generation, in transmission. And there's the visions are hardly, occurring. So entities are responsible for the procurement. After the approval is done and the document is submitted, KETRACO, for example, will now be required to progress and procure the project as aligned, in alignment with the list cost. The same thing will happen to KenGen as a generator, GDC as a resource developer of geothermal. And now we have also a new requirement that variations from the list cost will have to be subjected to the entire list cost process. That is, go through the technical, go through oversight, go through board approvals, and then go through the subcommittee on Kenya Power. So how we link the planning process with the national development goals is that typically, as I said, we have the Vision 2030 on the table when you're doing planning, but we will also take cognizance of the projects that are planned under the Vision 2030, include them in the plans. Resource requirement they will need in terms of energy. How much electricity, for example, do we need to power trains, as planned in the Vision 2030? But it's also it's kind of feedback mechanism, because in the end, what we plan also informs the Vision 2030. The list cost also plays a critical role in the energy sector policies in terms of what needs to be done where, how much geothermal do we need by when? Because it does the forecasting to 20 years. We do a 20-year plan. So it does the forecasting. So all the energy policies are actually informed by the least cost. And as I said, it actually guides development of infrastructure in the subsector. Can move to the next slide. In terms of the planning capacity, the current team of 33 has modeling capacity in demand focusing. It's able to do generation planning. Ever since 2016, we've actually not had anyone, any other consultancy, but there's a plan now to engage and get more new updated tools. Currently, demand forecasting using a simple tailor-made tool for Kenya. It's an Excel model. Generation expansion planning is also using a tool that was developed in 2016 by Lama, who are our consultants then, but the team is able to use the tools comfortably. Transmission, you're currently using PSSC, but the team also has capacity to do expansion planning using DigiSilent. And financial modeling, we use Excel. And in terms of improving on capacity, we continuously engage with development partners for training and acquiring new tools. As I said, we are currently considering, changing the planning tool you're using for generation. A more flexible tool that would allow us to optimize better renewables and especially variable, such as wind and solar. And then in the past, we haven't worked with universities, but there's new thinking now with partnering with local universities and research bodies to just enhance and impact the skill that the team has on now the students in colleges and also engaging other research entities in the country. And that was my final slide, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Grace, for a very interesting presentation and also being on time. We will get back to the question and answer. I have some questions to you, but we'll first go to Egypt speaker. I hope they're online. If Mr. Hala and Ali, if you can switch on the camera, let me introduce you. Okay, Dr. Hala is here. Okay, let me introduce both of you. So we have a speaker from both from the Ministry of Electricity and Renewable Energy. And this presentation will be shared by Dr. Hala Ramadan, Director of Economic Environment Studies Department at New Renewable Energy Authority, NELA, and Mr. Ali Ahmed Ali, the Director of the International Cooperation Department, and both under the ministry. And Hala has been a member of the working team that develops the last Egypt's energy strategy, and she leads the energy modeling team. Ali has also been participating in Egypt energy policy development as a member of country's energy strategy work group. I hope both of you are with us already.
I'm with you. Should I share the presentation from my side, or are you going to share it from your
We are going to share. We have it here.
Fine, thank you.
So now floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you. Should I start? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for a kind invitation and this opportunity to exchange knowledge. First of all, may I shut down my camera to avoid the network problem? Is it will be fine?
So far it's working perfect, so you can keep it. If it has some problem, we can stop it.
Okay, thank you very much. We prepare our agenda today to transfer our knowledge in putting our strategy in Egypt. How we develop the scenarios, the responsible entities which are responsible for approve the strategy or discuss. Whom are the Supreme Council and what are its consists of? What is the goals and challenges which we face among the period which in our route to implement the strategy? how we update it, and under which circumstances, what kind of scenarios we end up with, and what are the key steps when we prepared our strategy. This is our agenda today. I'm gonna move fast. First of all, when I look for the previous information, I found that at 1982, it was our first move trying to prepare our energy strategy. It was to reach 5% from the renewable energy by the year of 2000, but according to the history, it doesn't work due to the high cost of the renewable energies. Then what are the responsible entities? At the beginning, they established the Supreme Council Energy, and it was in 1979. And then they trying to put a unit inside the planning ministry, and they establish it also. But they found that if they may get back again to the Supreme Council, it will be better, and we can see it why in the next slide. And as you all know, or as you introduced me, I'm from New and Renewable Energy Authority, which is established to be the focal point to develop and introduce renewable energy technologies to Egypt. So at 2014, the Supreme Council reestablished from a different ministries. And here, next slide, please. Okay. Here, next slide, please. Oh, the auto.
Dr. Hala?
I'm sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, I hear you now.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I hope we didn't miss anything before. Fine?
Yep, you are at the Supreme Council for Energy.
Thank you. So here we will find the Supreme Council of Energy. It consists of many of the ministers, which they are related to the decision making in this point. Ministry of Tourism, Ministry of Transportation, Ministry of Trade, Industry, Investment, Planning and International Cooperation, and Environment, Electricity, Petroleum. Why we will see in the implementation part. Next slide, please. When we are trying to put our strategy, there was goals, and we face challenges to reach those goals. Our goals was 3 goals, main targets: ensure power supply secure, sustainability guarantee, enhancing competitive markets. And the challenges which we face in this part, in enhancing, as an example, we face just a second. We face the infrastructure development. and we need to encourage investment. Uh, Regulation, we need regulation also in this part. Cooperation with different entities and ministries. Also, we need, one of the challenges was to create a system financially self-dependent. So here we need to introduce the private sector into the market. Uh, we need governance. So we need to restructure some of our entities and build an information system to move on with the strategy. Also, we need to provide environment to support competition between private sectors or between investors. We need a large of investments. So also we need to support those investments, and at the end all those goals and was built to save our environment. So the main target also was the environment itself, how we deal with the environment problem and how we should meet our committed and the promises to save our environment or climate changes. Next slide, please. So in October 2016, we approved our first strategy. It was choosing scenario number B4, which was the least cost. As my colleague, which speaks at first word, says, yes, we choose the least cost scenario. And after it, here we're gonna go to the how we should update and during which periods and what is the reasons behind the updates. In 2019, so it's just almost 2 years from 2016 when we felt that we should update our strategy. At the beginning, if we go quickly to the manpower, we found we got help from the foreign experience experts. Stage number 2, we start train our own staff. Scenario number 3, or our nowadays, we are going to build a unit which is going to be responsible for the update to update the strategy itself when it needed. Yani. Why we need to update it from time to time? It's according to the GDP gross, international prices for crude oil, gas import, hard coal, population growth rate if it changes, new technologies. You know, all of us hear about hydrogen and new technology in storage, EVs and smart grids and so on. It takes a reason from us to update the strategy 4. Next slide, please. Okay, I need to move fast through the basic element in of the strategy basis. If we try to imagine, it's a table. On the right, we're gonna find the main elements which we should study deep down to reach the needed strategy, like oil and natural gas production, subsidize, availability of coal for electric power generation, nuclear energy, renewable energy, and energy efficiency. Those were the main basic elements which we took and to reach different stories or different scenarios. At the end, we get up with 4 scenarios. As I mentioned before, we choose 4P, yes, but we end up at the first strategy implementation, we end up with 4 scenarios. One of them was for the alternative for renewable energy resources. Scenario number 2, postpone use nuclear and the renewable energy resources and relying on high production of electrical energy. Scenario number 3 focused on renewable energy sources. But at the end, we choose least cost scenario. It needs an update from time to time. Next slide, please. Okay. The key steps to prepare the strategy. First of all, we should have a responsible organizational structure, as I mentioned, Supreme Council or High Supreme Council. Measuring and evaluating energy resources from time to time. Enabling framework from objective, regulation, laws, mechanisms, enhancing local benefits. We should review all those points to prepare the total framework or enabling framework. Develop roadmap, includes all the sectors. Evaluate and measure costs, benefits, environment and social impacts. Assessing the situation, reviewing variables and updating. All those points needs a lot of funds, and we may fund ourselves at the end that we're gonna deal with different international association or organization to reach our target. So it may, we may at the end found ourselves that we're gonna manage the situation and deal with different entities. So we should adding our own targets and our own goals and objectives and manage them. Here, I'm gonna leave the floor to my colleague Ali, if he's in, to complete the presentation, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Hala. I understand that Ali has dropped out of the this platform,
okay.
and
okay, the point Ali would like to add, I think the capacity building point.
If you can just speak for a couple of more minutes. Actually, we have 15 minutes allocated for Egypt and the time is up. If you can just say a couple of more minutes about the summary of Ali's presentation, that would be very helpful.
Okay. Ali's point was going to be among the capacity building and how we start train our own staff in the main sectors or the engaged sectors to reach to increase their capacity to prepare and update the strategy without need experts from outside or from abroad to prepare it in-house according to the different situation or different variables which may change from time to time. This is the main point. So we start with the totally foreign expert, then a group from in-house member trained from a foreign expert, and then totally local team and a unit, virtual unit from different ministries, they are involved in the strategy preparation when we need the update. This is the steps for the capacity building. Here I finish my presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. Maybe Mr. Ali can be back sooner, and we can engage him during the question and answer session.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we have half an hour question and answer session. We have collected few questions. Grace, are you, maybe you can also switch on the camera if you are available. So let me start with, so as I mentioned, we have 3 themes for this webinar. One is the use of scenarios, development of scenarios, and capacity building of scenarios. Maybe I would start with a few questions that are related to the use of, development of scenarios. So we have some questions. Maybe I take two questions from the audience. One is, how do you integrate the sub-plans into an integrated energy report? Prioritize sector development. In particular, in the light of energy transition from fossil to clean energy, how do you align the oil and gas plants with the non-fossil energy plants? And another aspect of this is that another question is, globally, trends are towards more and more end-use sector fuel is replaced by electricity, most notably EV, so in the transport sector. Is the process, so how is this a new trend of using electricity in transportation sector or the building sector, how these are taken into account in your plans? So maybe I can ask Grace first, and then Hala can answer the question next.
Okay.
Should I go first or?
Yes, please, Grace.
All right. So in terms of greenhouse gases consideration in the planning, I would say Kenya is lucky in the sense that we have geothermal, so that allows us to have a pretty green plan that is also providing base load. So we, with regards to fossil, we actually have very, very, very little consideration for that right now. I mean, the current plan we have, I would say, is the 90% green because we have geothermal. So we do not have a problem with, and we have a lot of solar as well, and wind projects that are coming up. A bit of hydro is existing and very little coming up in the future. But so there were initial plans for coal, but I think over time that has, the government has pretty much moved towards the reduction of the same. So yeah, basically, yeah, that's all I would say. Because of our resources, we do not have a challenge meeting our requirements. Yeah.
Thank you. Hala, do you have any answer to this question?
Yes, of course. As I mentioned, Egypt committed to its obligation for the greenhouse gases, reducing the emission, I mean. Of course, when we implement our master plan, of course, our main major point, we are focusing on reducing the emissions. So yes, it's a majority here, but it's related to the resource assessment because we owned a lot of renewable energy resources. Here, there was a room for us to increase the renewable energy in our master plan. So yes, of course, it's a very an important point, and we should put it, of course.
Thank you for both. Maybe similar to that, there are many questions about the alignment with the alignment with the decarbonization goal. Let me ask one question. Thank you for the very informative presentation. At the COP, the Kenyan president announced that Kenya plans to be 100% clean electricity generation by 2030. How are you factoring this in your least cost plan? Great.
Again, I'll just say what we and indeed his commitment is achievable in the sense that with our existing resources, I mean Kenya can actually generate to up to about 10,000 megawatts of geothermal. It's renewable.
Great, I think we lost you. Are you still here? Okay, I think we lost her. Maybe I'll go to Hala. There are questions about the social factors. How is your plans or the planning process taking into account the social factors in the process?
As we all know, using renewable energy, of course, makes available for a plenty of job opportunities. So here the impact of, at the beginning we prepare a social and environment study study before implementing any project. But really, when we evaluate the impact of using or increasing the renewable energy in our master plan, and build schools and new education subjects in the college and schools and so on, its impact on the social life much more better. So from a practical point of view, yes, it owns a very positive impact from the social and the environment points.
Okay, interesting. Maybe follow-up questions. So you said that you have developed different scenarios, and you mentioned that there are 4 scenarios that follow different narratives. And every planning cycle you select from each of them, which is the most competitive for sector. How often do you update your strategy?
As I mentioned, that there was some points or some elements affected, and when it changed, it needs an update. So if our GDP changes, if our population rate changes, if the oil and the natural gas prices, international prices, it changes. The technology for renewable, if there was a new technology or the prices for the technology itself changes, here we need an update. So it's a market element we should focus on and measure, and when we found the rates change, we update. How we update? As I said, nowadays we are going to working on building our own team, local team, to update the energy strategy.
Okay, so it means that there's no prescribed years, like you update it every 3 years or 5 years. It's not like.
I mean, normally now every 2 years.
Every 2 years.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I just wonder if Grace is back online. Are you here with us?
Yes, I'm back. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. Okay, so we have another question for you. So you have mentioned that you have different areas for planning: electricity access, electricity and access, etc. All of these covered in the same least cost plans, or does that only consider electricity and other sectors are done through different processes? So it's about how these processes are integrated.
As I said, the other plans I would not say are active as yet. It's coming as a result of new legislation, the 2019 Act, that requires the ministry to do an integrated national energy plan. So it will have the other sub-plans. But the least cost only covers electricity, the value chain of electricity, but not the other forms of energy. So we will have, plans regarding bioenergy, energy efficiency, and access coming separately. But currently, that is not actively being done. There are strategies, though. There are strategies in place, but in terms of planning, not quite there.
Okay, very good. Maybe I move now to the question related to the use of scenarios. In using scenarios, you need to communicate the results of scenario to public. How is the communication done? Do you publish the results on as a report, or do you also make consultation meetings? There are some interesting examples from other countries that use like online tools. How is your results of scenarios are communicated to the public? Maybe I can start with Grace and then followed by Hala.
So typically within the stakeholders is through meetings, and as I said, we have workshops. But what happens, it's also communicated formally, through letters. But in the past, we've had the list cost being uploaded in the regulator's website and the ministry. And a lot of the other agencies are not required, but a lot of the other agencies actually just share it online. But we do not have like public hearings on the list cost, because again, this is an exercise that we do every 2 years. They're updating. So it would be a bit heavy to expect to have public, hearings on such a rigorous exercise. But in terms of sharing the documents, they're available online.
Okay, great, thanks. Hala?
Like we said, yes, we updated or put it via our Supreme Council, which consists of various ministers. And we get the approval from the public committee, we call it Majlis Shab. It's like a Congress, so we discussed it via workshops, media, before the approvals, of course, but it took the political steps to approve. So it goes through all the steps to announce or discuss or get the approval,
Okay, interesting. So these are about the internal process. Now I would also like to ask about the process for coordination with the neighbors. Kenya and Egypt both are the part of the Eastern African Power Pool, and how the coordination with neighbors are taking place now, not only in the electricity sector, which is coordinated, I guess, through the Power Pool, but more generally, coordination with neighbors. Can you make comments on that? Maybe can I start with Hala?
Okay. I expand our network with the neighbors, built international grid as dealing with agreements with our neighbors to important export or transfer the energy itself. So of course, no one implement a sole strategy. It needs and takes a commitment with our neighbors.
Okay. Is there any particular process that you followed in consultation with the neighbors?
Of course, we are nowadays, yani, or yani, among the 3 previous years, we signed an agreements dealing with the grid, expanding our grid with our neighbors. So yeah, we are working on.
Okay. Thank you very much. The same question to Grace.
As you rightly said, Kenya is actually very active within the East African Power Pool. Entities that participate there, Sketrako, Kengen, a transmission, a master plan that looks at, the power pools, all the countries, what they have planned. So the list cost forms and the plan, and it's obviously optimized, and it's through that process that you identify interconnector, if anybody is going access or short, and take feasibility studies together. So we have like work going on between ourselves and in Tanzania. We have work going on between ourselves and Uganda and Ethiopia. And the feasibility studies done together, the procurements are done. The financing
Yeah, Grace, sorry, we are breaking up a bit. So I
also joint financing. Actually, yeah, I don't know if I was audible.
Yeah, it was a little bit breaking up. Would you mind speaking again? Maybe you can speak a little bit slower. Grace?
Say that again, sorry.
Yes.
You need me to speak about?
Yes, because we could not really hear what you said. You're breaking up a bit.
Okay. I hope it's better now.
Yeah,
I just said that we do,
slower.
the coordination is main and predominant. Okay. All right. So I said a lot of the planning is done within the East African Power Pool. You can hear me? Okay. So the planning is done within East African Power Pool. We have each country's, expansion plans, both generation and transmission, and the plans are then optimized to identify if there's any need or interconnections, and when interconnections again are studies and developing infrastructure together with Tanzania, the same thing, and Uganda. But of the much planning work is done within the East African Power Pool. African Power Pool develops a master plan for the region.
Okay. Yeah, it was not so easy to get everything, but I understand that plans are coordinated through the power pool. Okay, now I would like to move to a question on the capacity. So it was very interesting that we have two speakers. One is representing the government side and the other one utility side. So maybe the first question that I would like to ask is, so from the utility side, what are the necessary capacity that government should have for the for better coordination of the planning? I know that you have in utility in Kenya, you have utility the planning capacity, but government has some also kind of capacity to do the planning. If so, what kind of capacity is is appropriate to have? So that's the question to Grace. And the question to Hala is that you mentioned that you started from the foreign consultancy and now you're completely insourcing the planning process. So if you can just talk about what's the benefit of insourcing the planning capacity within the government vis-a-vis outsourcing the capacity to external consultants or external parties. Can I start with Grace?
So with regard to the planning capacity within government, the Least Cost Committee has the Ministry of Energy represented and playing a critical role, even in terms of convening the teams at times. So the ministry in itself has technical people who have planning capacity. You know, they can actually coordinate, they can actually do the real work. But the fact that it's within a committee is actually it's an existing committee, that's a standing committee that has continuity. That helps a lot in the sense that the expertise is retained, and all utilities and other, and ministry itself and the regulator can actually do the real work of expansion planning. And the other thing we have been doing is to make sure that there is no single utility that is represented by one person. We also encourage that the older people, now, I'm an older person in terms of the planning process, we'll always have younger people you're nurturing, so that there's handover of
Sorry, Grace, you're breaking up.
Continuously
Unfortunately, I could not hear the last part of it. Maybe I will go now to Hala for the question that I just posed earlier.
For this question, as I mentioned, we start with totally foreign expert, and then half-half, I mean our team with the expert. Now we built our own local experience. It's a unit, virtual one. It will consist of the main ministries, of course, petroleum and electricity. We train them. We bring the same consultant, by the way, which prepare the strategy at the beginning, and we are using the same tool, software, I mean, and train our staff. This unit are not finished yet. Okay, I'm one of the, responsible. I will be responsible for this unit. So we are working now on the hierarchy itself, and we are trying to select the local employers. It's among assess their ability for such a kind of work. I mean, from we assess a lot of things, their knowledge, their ability, whether they need to reach the target which we need, what kind of train which we should bring for it. Is it will be part from it local train, should we bring the expert here, or should we send them abroad? It will be both, by the way, because at the end you need to see and visit the other countries to review their knowledge in this field. So you select the employers, you assess their ability, and train them with the same expert, which implements the strategy at the beginning. This is our way.
And what is the benefit of doing that? What is the benefit of having trained people in-house?
You know, the factors which changes, it may change very fast, not only 2 years, you know. We found it's not good if we need to measure something or to bring a foreign consultant each time. I think it's better to use our local team and increase their capacity. It's a benefit for both, for the government and for the employers themselves.
Okay. Thank you. So maybe given the time is coming up, I would like to ask the last question to both of you. So Irina has been engaged in building planning capacity, supporting countries with increasing the planning capacity. And we are very often asked, how can they institutionalize the planning capacity? If you have any advice to the countries who are starting to build planning capacity, what would you be your advice? Can I start with you, Grace, if you are back online?
I hope, am I audible now?
Yes.
Okay, so I think there's merit in having planning being done internally and with internal in-house capacity, because then you're able to do a lot more. You're not stuck on requiring resources to do an expansion plan, for example.
Mm-hmm.
You know, these are salaried people. They have the skill they can, and in the end, they also offer a lot of help in many other things. But I would say in Kenya, I have seen merit in having it being coordinated within the utilities. We are an unbundled sector, so transmission is separate from distribution and generation as well. So you cannot have one entity doing that, because in the end, you know, Ketraco will be required to implement something, Kengen will be required to develop some capacity somewhere, Kenya Power will be required to connect people somewhere. So it's better when it's coordinated. And with that coordination, it's very important that there's a sort of a committee that works and is consistently working together, and as much as possible maintaining the committee, so that, I mean, there's harmony in terms of, and also the expertise is not lost along the way. A lot of resources are spent training people. The tools, the softwares themselves are not cheap. So when it's coordinated, these things become easier, and it's better to have everybody on the table other than having one entity doing it, because then also implementation of the plan becomes a challenge. That's all I would recommend to them.
Thank you. Hala?
I think, you know, knowledge and education never ends, you know. If we nowadays we use a kind of tool, it doesn't mean that it will end up forever. No, from time to time we need to exchange knowledge, as we do right now. We need to see what are others doing. Maybe we use another tool, but the main target for us, both objectives and learn the fundamentals to the team, the local team, I mean. Then if they are using any kind of tool, it doesn't matter. At the end, they get up with an overview and understanding what are the strategy, what are the main elements affected, and here we should update it when it changes from time to time, and the time for each report, I mean 4 times a year, 1 time a year, twice, or once just 2 years. It depends on. This is our point.
Thank you so much for great advice, and thank you very much for sharing your experience and knowledge and your insights with us. And I could not follow all the questions, and I'm very sorry about that, but I will submit this question to the presenters. If they agree, they can maybe give us the written answer so that we can share with the audience. So thank you very much, both Hala and Grace. Now, before we conclude, we have a short intervention from my IRENA colleague, Daniel Russo. So he works with me in the energy planning support team at the IRENA, and he will talk about IRENA's work to support institutional capacity building on energy planning in Africa. So Daniel, you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Yes, thank you, Asami. Thank you to all the presenters for those great, really great, interesting presentations. So I'll be discussing IRENA's capacity building work, and maybe we can go to the next slide. So to start off, the goal is going to sound quite familiar to what we've just heard. So the main goal for IRENA is to build the institutional capacity that we've heard about from the Kenya and Egypt context. And this is just showing a picture of the brochure that IRENA has, which has all of this information for you if you'd like to take a more detailed look. But how do we focus on building institutional capacity? There are three basic areas that we look at. And the first, ownership of the skills and the processes, which we heard about quite often in the previous presentations. Also having a transparent methodology and robust data. So I'll go into show a couple of examples of these, so we can move to the next slide. So the first thing we discussed was how do we get ownership of the skills and planning? So not just consultants working externally on these master plans or the planning process, but for countries to really devise their own strategies. So IRENA has two key modalities of support that it provides to the member states. And these are tailor-made programs that we develop together with partners on the ground. So for example, we have National Master Plan Development Support Program, which we've done with a number of countries. Here you see in Eswatini, worked with the government of Eswatini. And we also have Regional Model Analysis and Planning Program, which we've done in almost all of the regions of the African continent. In West Africa, 6-month program, work together with the ECOWAS Center for Renewable Energy and Efficiency, also in Central Africa with the Central African Power Pool. And other short-term trainings are also provided by IRENA in cooperation with other partner organizations throughout Africa. We recognize that a lot of other organizations and institutions also provide this type of work. And so IRENA works quite hard to coordinate as well with its partners. So to the next slide, we can discuss the actual tool that's used in these capacity building trainings, which is the SPLAT model. So we can move to the next slide. Perfect. So the other points that we think are critical to give institutional capacity, to build institutional capacity, is to have a good and transparent methodology and the data that's behind all of this work. And so IRENA provides this by giving access to its SPLAT message models for Africa. And these have also a particular focus and good detail on planning with renewable energy. And so the SPLAT message models are long-term capacity expansion models. And they're configured for each and every country in the African continent. And they're basically used as a starter kit for further work. And you'll see here, these are just some reports that have been released to summarize the work that's been done on this modeling framework. And the models attempt to configure things according to the master plans as well. So that using official data as much as possible, but also complementing that with IRENA's own infrastructure database and renewable energy databases, such as costs and resource characteristics. Particularly costs change quite often, especially nowadays with renewable energy. So it's quite important to have an up-to-date database behind all of this work. So to the next slide, give another example of the type of renewable energy data that we provide in this modeling framework. And I believe the next slide has this exactly. Here we go. And so this is just an example of the what we think of as good renewable energy data that we provide for planning use. And you'll see here we include in this modeling framework actual physical locations using geographic information systems to model solar and wind investment options. This is just an example from one of the recent pieces of work on East and South Africa that Irina has done. And also this is something that has been missing in this field for African planning of energy systems and power systems is a hydropower plant and profile database. So this database provides information on all of the generation profiles of hydropower plants that exist in Africa and that are currently being planned. So it's very important to reflect all of these things in the modeling and the planning. So we can go to the next slide. I believe this will be the last one, just to give background on the most recent work that Irina is doing to consolidate all of this capacity building. The next slide discusses a recent opportunity that Irina has now had to scale up the support in the African continent, together with the IAEA, which is the Atomic Energy Agency. Irina has been selected as the modeling partner to develop an African continental power system master plan. And this is an initiative led by the African Union and implemented by Ouda Nepad, one of the partners also of this LTES series. So we hope that this continental master plan could be a step towards establishing a process where the master plans from the various power pools can be integrated together. And so Irina's splat message modeling framework has been adopted as the tool for this. And in the coming months, so Irina with Ouda Nepad and the power pools will develop a version of Irina's Splat Africa model to do this work. And I think based on this, we really hope to have more opportunities to work with other stakeholders in the continent at the regional, national level to establish institutional capacity and also help all of these countries to tap the renewable energy sources that I think are really so desirable. And still have great potential in the continent. And so I think that's the last slide. That's just a quick overview of what Irina does to support countries and build capacity for energy planning and the type of work that Kenya and Egypt has shown us. So if you'd like to have more information, please feel free to take a look at the brochure that's mentioned. We'll provide the link. I believe we can send this link in the chat as well. So yeah, thank you very much. I think that's it from my side. Happy to take any questions too from anyone.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel, for being very much on time. We have one question from the audience. So what about planning and prospects for renewable energy in North Africa? We did not
Yes,
present
that's
that.
a very good point. Good question. So in the past, Irina has worked on this type of modeling and planning for East, South, Central, and West Africa. And currently, at the moment, we are working on North African planning and prospects for renewable energy. And the team and Irina is planning to consult and engage with the regional institutions of North Africa to present the modeling work that has been done and to get feedback on the results that we've received. So this is an ongoing process right now, and actually I'd encourage anyone who's joining from the North African region to get in touch with Irina if you would like to be part of that process. Very much appreciate any feedback.
Thank you. Maybe last question is, how can the countries benefit from programs with Irina? How can they start a program with us?
So I believe that's a great question. I'm very happy to work with any countries who are interested. And the official channel that we suggest is to find who the Irina focal point is in your country. Typically, this is someone at the ministry level, or you can get in touch with us, this team here, if this is just the quickest way for you. Please feel free to be in touch with any of the contact details that we've provided, and we can put you in touch with the Irina focal point. But we take official requests for work from all the member states of Irina.
Very good. So Daniel, maybe you can share our email on the chat so that everyone has it.
Absolutely, yes. If anyone would like to get in touch with the team about future work, or about any of this work that's been presented here, or anything related to the LTES series that's going on, I will send the contact details in the chat right now. Yeah.
Okay, very good. So now I would like to close this session. Thank you very much, Daniel, for this intervention. So I would now like to conclude today's session with the announcement of the next session. Can we have the slide back, please? Thank you. So the next session is scheduled for next Wednesday, this Wednesday, and we feature Eswatini and South Africa. And the next session will be moderated by Get Transformed. So today was the first session of the webinar series, and if any of the audience has any feedback on the way forward, you can just please write to us. And we will play a 1-minute video on the LTS network, and we will close with that. I hope the video is ready. Pauline? Okay, very good. So I hope to see you all on this platform again on Wednesday. Thank you. Bye.
The world of energy is changing. The energy system of the future will be based on sustainable, renewable energy. Innovation and digitalization are changing the way we consume energy. How can decision makers in governments and businesses prepare for the energy transition? Long-term energy scenarios, LTES, can help plan for a low-carbon future by identifying opportunities, potential risks, and cost-effective near-term solutions. IRENA actively supports energy planners through its global LTES network. Governments can share their experience, exchange best practices, and explore the most pressing future trends together with global experts. Government institutions and supporting technical agencies can become members of the LTES network. Join us. Contact LTES at irena.org for more information.